Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. After the Prophet, peace be upon him, conquered Mecca, and after the Muslims have settled the disputes that were in Mecca, and after the people, many of the tribes, as well as many of the people in Mecca, came and gave the Prophet, peace be upon him, the oath of allegiance, as well as many of them accepted Islam, a big battle happened between the Muslims and the people that decided to mutiny against the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Muslims. Now, most of the tribes they accepted Islam. Some of the big tribes, specifically two of them. The first one is Hawazin, and the second one is Thaqif. So Hawazin and Thaqif. Those are major tribes in the Arabian Peninsula. Those guys, they decided that it is time to attack the Muslims. And the leader of them, one of them, this leader, his name is Malik ibn Auf. They gathered around him and they gave him the leadership, and they said, okay, well, let's go fight the Muslims. And they had huge numbers of people, and they had a lot of strength. And these tribes, they were originally from Taif. Taif is a city in the Arabian Peninsula, and it is a very mountainous city. So it's a city in the mountains. And this is the city that actually, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, decided to go and visit them back when he was in Mecca to present his message and present Islam to them, they ended up basically driving him away from the city, as well as stoning him and the companion that he had with him. They sent the young children and the unbehaved kids in town, and those guys, they went and then they started throwing stones at the Prophet, peace be upon him, and at the other companion. So when Islam right now prevailed and Mecca entered into the fold of Islam, these guys, they came back and they wanted to fight the Muslims. And this Malik ibn Auf guy, this guy, he told everyone, let's go out, bring with you everything you own. Basically, your wealth, your sheep, your camels, even bring your wife and your children along with you, so that you do not run away from this battlefield. So the somebody else who was wise, he told him, like, look, like, if you win, those guys, or all this wealth that you're bringing with you and all your possessions, they're not going to help you. And if you don't win, at least you would not have sacrificed your wealth and your honor in this battle. The guy Malik ibn Auf, he said, he basically, was sarcastic about what this guy was saying, and people still listened to him, and they took everything out with them. And then they kept walking until they arrived to an area called Hunain. And this area was almost a valley between the mountains, and it had a very interesting structure, because if you enter it from one direction and you keep walking, it's like as if you're going down slope in this area that's called Hunain. And this is where the Muslims entered from. Now the Muslims went out. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he sent his spies to see what the situation is, and his spies told him, this is the situation. These guys are coming out in large numbers, and they're bringing everything with them. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, inshallah, like, by the will of God, they will be conquered by the Muslims tomorrow. And the Muslims went out, and guess who went out with them? Not only the people that have had that almost 21 years of training with the Prophet, peace be upon him, those people that have really understood the meaning of Islam, those people that have put in perspective what this life is and what the hereafter is, but also the people who the Prophet, peace be upon him, freed after opening Mecca, after conquering Mecca. The people that he told them, "Idhabu fantum at-tulaqa," go, you are free. Those are the elites of Mecca, and everybody else who fought the Prophet, peace be upon him, for 20 plus years. These guys came as well, and everybody from these guys, they felt, that, and many of the Muslims, they felt, we will not be losing this battle. because we have the numbers and we've won battles with a lot less numbers than this, so we're all good. Especially those people that are very new to Islam, who have not have had that grounding in Islam. And what happened was that when the Muslims arrived, it was just before sunrise. It was in the early morning, the very early dawn. And they started to enter the wadi. They started to enter this area of Hunain. And the people from Ta'if, Thaqif and Hawazin, they have arrived earlier. So they hid themselves within the different basically holes and the different structures that were around this Hunain area, and they were waiting. And as the Muslims started to enter, the Thaqif and Hawazin, they started to attack the Muslims. So they started to, their archers started to attack, and then their horses and their army started pushing back, basically killing the Muslims. And the moment the Muslims started to see those arrows just like raining upon them, the front of the army started to run back. They did not have the spiritual strength to stay, and they were quite dumbfounded by what they were saying, or what they were seeing. And they started to run back. And guess right now, the army is coming like this. And now the people that are at the forefront, they're trying to push back. It became a big mess. And those guys from Ta'if, Hawazin and Thaqif, they started to attack the Muslims, as well as anybody who was running anywhere. They would just, go and kill them. And it was such a big mess that, people were all over the place. It is said that the rides that they were on, they were just trampling. It's almost a stampede. They were trampling on top of each other, and they were just, running on top of each other, and everybody's in every direction. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he saw this, he got furious, like what's going on? Why are you guys running away? This is not, the first time in a battlefield. And he started to call upon the people, and the people were not listening. And he said, he started to call upon the people, like, gather around me, and nobody was listening. So his uncle, Al-Abbas, was beside him. So he tells the Abbas, start calling upon certain people that have witnessed and they were present in certain events in history. So Al-Abbas started to call upon the people who were present during the Hudaybiyah treaty, during the peace treaty that the Muslims had with the Meccan people when they came to do the minor pilgrimage the first time in the 6th year after immigration from Mecca to Medina. And he called upon the Ansar, the people that have given victory to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and have given the refugees an asylum in Medina. So Al-Abbas had a very strong voice. So when he started to call upon these people, the people who've heard this, they're like, okay, I'm going to see where the sound is coming from, because it was still dark and it was a big mess. Everybody's running everywhere. And they started to try to go and approach that voice. And because people were running in every direction and every about place that they could find, the people that were hearing the voice and they were trying to approach it, it is said that they found it very difficult, because people who are running, they're crashing into them and they're not able to move forward. So much so that it is said that some of them, they just carried their shield around their neck, and they just started to try to march between all those people that were running away to get to the sound, the source of the sound. And then gradually about 100 people gathered around the Prophet, peace be upon him. These are the people that have had that strong grounding in Islam, and they've had that long experience with the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now, the interesting thing is that the people that the Prophet, peace be upon him, freed them in Mecca, at-Tulaqa, those elites of Mecca, despite them accepting Islam, they were so new to it that the hatred of Islam did not exit their heart. It's still within their heart, which is interesting, because they have given allegiance to the Prophet, peace be upon him. Even Abu Sufyan, who was the head of Mecca, who told the Meccans, don't fight the Prophet because you're not going to be able to win against him. When he saw the Muslims running, he said, he was happy, and he said that they're running away. Nothing's gonna stop them except the sea, the Red Sea that they're gonna run into. And somebody else was saying, batul al-sihr, like this magic where the Muslims are just winning one battle after the other is finally broken. This streak is finally broken. And somebody else was saying, look, like, for somebody from Quraysh, who is the Prophet peace be upon him, to rule me, that's better for me than for someone from Hawazin or Thaqif, which are the Ta'if people, to rule me. Like, absolutely not the point of this whole thing. And when those 100 people gathered around the Prophet peace be upon him, the Prophet peace be upon him, he said, okay, now it's time, let's go. And with 100 people only, the Prophet peace be upon him, started marching right towards the army of those aggressors. And before long, they were just like taking them one after the other, so much so that now Hawazin and Thaqif started to run away. And they started to run away, and they left behind them everything. They left behind them thousands of coins of silver. They left behind them thousands of sheep and camels, and they left all their families, their children, their wives, everything. They left everything behind. And when those people that were running away and they were happy that the Muslims were being defeated saw that, they're like, okay, now let's go. And then they started, going forward, and they wanted to be part of the action, especially when they start to see that, the Muslims are starting to collect the bounties of the war. And that is very interesting. Because when the Prophet, peace be upon him, went back to Mecca, and he had all this wealth with him, he held back on dividing it. The rules of the day back then is that the army gets to divide amongst themselves whatever bounties that they have acquired. Back in the day, they were not formal armies. They were not official armies, and the soldiers were not paid soldiers. So basically, any bounties that are made from the war, it gets distributed between the soldiers who have participated. So those guys that finally came back when they saw the Muslims won, they came to the Prophet, and they are looking for nothing but the wealth. Their eyes are just flickering to get the wealth of this world. Such a sad situation. So what does the Prophet, peace be upon him, do? The Prophet, peace be upon him, he wanted to teach them a lesson, and he wanted to see if he can soften their hearts, that despite them being basically traitors at that war, he gave them all this wealth, like everything. And when people started to see like how the Prophet was giving, like somebody who does not fear, as they said, who does not fear basically poverty, more people came, and everybody who basically did not stand with the Prophet peace be upon him started to come to him and basically harshly telling him, give me some of this wealth. So much so that it is said that the people gathered around him so much, pulling everything he has, and he's telling them, look, you can have everything, like I'm not going to keep anything. So that they even cornered him to a tree. So he went up that tree, and then they took his piece of cloth, the one that he wraps himself with, the only thing, a rida, that he had. They just pulled it away. So he tells them, "Oh people, give me back my cloth. Like trust me, anything that I have, I will give it out. I have no use for this stuff." And guess what happened at that moment? People who were with the Prophet, peace be upon him, from the beginning, people who stood with him, who did not run away, the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not give them anything. He said, you're not gonna have anything from this. And then just naturally, people started to think and say, okay, did the Prophet, peace be upon him, forget about us? Like, is it just he met his people again, the people of Quraysh, that we're not important anymore? and somebody came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, from Al Ansar, from those people that basically give the refugees, give the Muhajirin the asylum in Medina. And his name was Sa'd ibn Ubadah. And he told the Prophet, peace be upon him, O Prophet of Allah, my people have found in their hearts something against you. So he said, why? He said that, you're distributing all this wealth and they didn't get anything from it. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, asked him, like, how about you, Sa'd? Like, how do you feel? He said, I'm just one of my people. So he's telling the Prophet, I'm feeling the same thing. He said that the Prophet told him, okay, go gather everybody, like everybody that Al Muhajirin wal Ansar, just put them all together and then call me once you're done that. So he gathered them, and then he went to the Prophet, peace be upon him. He told him, O Prophet of Allah, I've gathered them here for you. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he stood amongst them and he started to speak to them. And he started by praising God. And then he tells them that, oh people, like, weren't you like different groups? And I came to you, and by me coming to you, God guided you to Islam, and you have stopped the wars, the internal wars that were amongst you, and so on, so on, so on, so on. And they said, yes, indeed, O Prophet of Allah. And the Prophet is asking them, and he tells them, why aren't you responding to me? Like, why aren't you pushing back? And they said, what do we push back with? He said, the Prophet told them that if you want, you could push back and you will be truthful and you will be believed. If you want, you could have told me that, didn't you come to us as a refugee and we have given you asylum? Didn't we support you until you have won? Didn't we believe in you? All of this. And, they said that, all praise be to God. Like, we're not going to say that. And he told them, like, how do you feel that, and why are you so unhappy that I am giving those people just mere cheap things of this world? He called it lu'a'at dunya, like basically something that is negligible in this life, that I'm giving it to them just to soften their hearts. And I have basically given you guys to your faith, to the strength of your faith, which means that because your faith is so strong and you have that experience and you have that deep understanding, I have depended on that understanding and didn't give you anything from this life. I just gave you all to your, or made you all just depend on that depth of that belief that you had. How would you like it that people take this negligible worldly stuff, and then you come back with the prophets of Allah to your homes? And then he made a prayer for them, and he said, he basically he asked God to bless those Ansar and the children of the Ansar and the children of the children of the Ansar. So people there, they realized what's really important in this world, and it is not the mere materialistic stuff. There are things that are beyond the materialistic that are important in this world. So they were happy and they said, we're all good. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, before he started distributing this wealth amongst the people, he waited because he wanted those two tribes. He wanted Hawazin and Thaqif to come back to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and basically just ask for forgiveness, and he will give them all that stuff back. But they didn't. So the Prophet didn't have anything to do except to distribute this wealth according to the traditions and the norms of the society back then. And he did. And then one tribe came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, one of those two tribes. And they said, we apologize, we accept Islam, and we're not going to fight against you. Can you give us back our wealth? He said, look, it's already distributed. Would you guys want your money back, or would you guys want your families back? Like, which one do you want? They said that we would not basically buy any wealth with our families. So basically they said we want our families back. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he stood amongst the people and he said, those guys are right now your brothers. If you guys accept, just return to them the things that you have received from them, or from the bounties that were collected from these guys. And everyone was saying, yes, we accept that. But the Prophet told them, look, this could be just the pressure of the moment. Go and think about it and let your leaders come back to me with your decision. So the leaders came back to the Prophet and they said, everybody accepts, just take this stuff back. And they did. And then the people that ran away to Ta'if, and they hid in the basically castles that were there and the fortresses that were there, they were still preparing to continue to cause trouble to the Muslims. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he went with his army and he surrounded these fortresses. And those guys, they started basically using their archers and they started to throw the arrows against the Muslims, and they killed some of the Muslims. So the Muslims backed away. And the Prophet of Allah, he didn't want to basically kill them or punish them. He just wanted them to realize where the truth is. So he stood there for a while, and he surrounded. He basically had a siege around these fortresses, but these fortresses had a ton of wealth, so they could have survived for a very long time. And then the Prophet, peace be upon him, he asked the people, like, what do you guys think? Because he wanted to just leave them and go back home, because the point is made right now. So some people, they said, no, let's just wait. And then eventually they were convinced. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he went back to Medina, just leaving them. And then eventually they all came back out of the will of their heart. And then they accepted Islam. They apologized to the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now, these whatever happened during that Hunain battle, that battle of Hunain, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, mentioned it in the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like says that that Allah has given you victory في مواطن كثيرة ويوم حنين, in many places and many occasions, as well as in the day of Hunain. إذا أعجبتكم كثرتكم, you were so proud of your numbers. فلم تغن عنكم شيئا, these numbers did not help you in any way. وضاقت عليكم الأرض بما رحبت, and then the earth has been made so tight for you, basically describing that moment in which they were receiving so many arrows and they were being hit by the swords, that it was so depressing and so gloomy. ثم وليتم مدبرين, and then you started to run away. ثم أنزل الله سكينته على رسوله وعلى المؤمنين وأنزل جنودا لم تروها وعذب الذين كفروا وذلك جزاء الكافرين. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given that steadfastness to the people that have believed, those people that surrounded to the Prophet, peace be upon him. And those people have stuck with the Prophet, peace be upon him, and then they won. And God had basically punished those guys that disbelieved, those guys that have attacked the Prophet, peace be upon him. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he went to Medina after distributing all this wealth amongst the people that secretly hated him. Many of them, they came back and they basically had so much love for the Prophet after that, which is natural, because some people, faith and love enters their heart if they were given materialistic stuff. You find, for example, if you have a horse or a cattle or something, how do you drag it back to safety? Sometimes you cannot drag it back to safety, to the place that you're keeping it in, except with food, except with materialistic stuff. Although you're basically telling that that horse or that cattle, you're coming back to the staple in which you'll be safe at. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, used this wealth for doing that same exact thing, and that changed the people even more and made them more in alliance with Islam and with the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Muslims. So this has been the story of the Battle of Hunain. Next time, inshallah, we'll cover a very, very, very important incident that happened with the Muslims and the Prophet, peace be upon him. Until then, I'll see you inshallah next time. Have a good time. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.